So I'll call the meeting of January 10th to order. This is a meeting of the Yolo County Transportation District Board of Directors. Our first portion of our meeting today will be focused on the managed lane project for Interstate 80. But before we get to, and then we'll then go to our regular meeting at about 7:40 or so. So we'll be conducting regular items of business at that point, and that'll of course have public comment on general matters, and then the business items that we have coming there. So I think we do have a quorum. We have Mr. Ledesma, Mr. Frericks, Mr. Stallard, myself, and Mr. Dulcich, and we understand that Director Lauren will be joining us in a few minutes. So I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda, and then we'll move into our consent items. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with Autumn? I'm assuming there are no changes that you.
That's correct. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stallard. Is there a second?
Second by Frericks.
Second by Frericks. So Daisy, you're going to be doing the duties of clerk this evening. I've been informed. Would you please call the roll?
Will do, Director Saylor. City of Davis.
Aye.
Okay. City of Woodland.
Aye.
City of Winters. Not
Absent.
present. Not present. Yolo County.
Aye.
And I believe that's it. That's City of West Sacramento. Sorry.
I'll forgive it. It's a new year.
No.
I should be ashamed of myself since I'm a resident of West Sacramento.
The chip on his shoulder is showing
It
already.
just got bigger.
I just want to thank Daisy for chipping in. As you guys may know, our former clerk, Kathy Souza, retired after, I want to say, 20 years. So December was her last meeting, and we are working on hiring a replacement. But I just want to appreciate Daisy for jumping in, wearing this hat.
Thank you, Daisy.
You're welcome. Happy to do
All
so.
right, and that brings us to our consent agenda, which is the minutes of our last December meeting and authorization to continue with remote meetings tonight. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Moved by Frericks.
Thank you.
Ledesma was second.
So motion by Frericks, second by Ledesma. Please call the roll, Daisy.
City of Woodland.
Aye.
City of Davis.
Aye.
City of West Sacramento.
Aye.
City of Winters. Not present. Yolo County.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, very good. Did you get to vote that time, Chris? I wasn't sure.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
All right, very good. So
You're trying to revoke it now? Is that what this is?
So this brings us to item 4, which I think I'll just make a couple comments and turn it over to Autumn. This is very exciting, and Greg Wong with the Caltrans district office here is with us. And Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Your partnership is really cool in this endeavor. In fact, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Caltrans' successful application for the infra grant and for your ongoing support for this project. So we're very excited to have you here. This is it's a once in a generation opportunity to make a lasting improvement to our region's transportation system. I'm very excited about the presenters that Autumn has been able to bring together. What the order of business for us tonight is to really look at this not as a set of disconnected elements, but rather as a package, as a whole. So what can we do as a region through the vehicle that we have with the Yolo County Transportation District to advance a whole series of goals? Our board adopted a series of goals last meeting, and we have today presentations on air quality and induced demand, on opportunities for transit, on equity issues that are really key to our board's discussion, and on the regional context. I think really top-notch experts and perspective thinking leaders on each of these topics. Colleagues, what I'd like to do tonight is, rather than go into questions and answers on each of these presentations, I'd ask us to listen to it all, reflect on how all of these different disparate elements of this consideration fit together, complement each other, interact. We'll have a question and answer time to be sure that we just have a understanding, and that ask that we do focus on questions and answers. Then we may have some public comment at that time, and we'll listen to that and have that be a part of our reflection where we get into discussion of the matters before us. And then what we can close by taking another look at our goals that we adopted last time, just to remind ourselves of what we're up to and how that all fits. We do have a timetable this evening, and the idea is to get into our regular meeting at about 7:40, give or take. And so our public comment today we'll have after the presentations and the Q&A, and then we'll have an open public comment for anybody who's on the call and wants to talk with us about other matters. We'll have that at the beginning of our regular business meeting. Autumn, did I leave anything out?
No, thanks, Director Saylor. I think you just about covered it. I just want to thank all of our speakers who've agreed to join us tonight and join you in appreciating all the perspectives they're going to bring. I know this is a long meeting, but I hope you'll find it's very rich. We do have 4 presentations from 5 speakers, and we're going to try to do that in a little under an hour and then have time for Q&A and discussion. So I would ask that you do hold questions until we've heard from everyone. And I'm going to introduce our speakers one by one as they go through their presentations. And so I'll introduce our first speakers, and then when they're done, I'll introduce the second speakers and so on. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So I want to welcome our first speakers, Amy Lee and Jamie Volker, who are going to be tag teaming our first presentation. They are both with the UC Davis National Center for Sustainable Transportation, both working with Professor Susan Handy, and both have published research around the concept of induced demand and how highway projects impact driving and air quality. So I want to turn it over to Amy and Jamie, and you should be able to share your screens. Let me know if you can't.
Thanks, Autumn. I cannot share my screen, actually.
Okay, let's make sure we give all our presenters sharing privileges. Let's see, all panelists, I think I can do that. Okay, try it now.
We are on, thank you. Okay. You all should be seeing my presentation slides, right?
Yep, we can see it.
Fabulous. Thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Amy Lee. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Davis in the Transportation Technology and Policy Graduate Group. I'll let Jamie introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Amy, and thanks a lot for having us here today, Autumn. My name is Jamie Volker. I'm a postdoctoral researcher working with the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis as well. And I got my PhD recently from the same program that Amy's in, Transportation Technology and Policy.
Great. So we are going to do a very quick tour through the concept of induced travel. This is a bit of a run of show. We'll start with just a basic overview of induced travel and some evidence from the research. And then I'll turn it over to Jamie for some examples that are from California, and then how to think about this and how to apply this to actual project planning and transportation planning. So I'd like to start with an example that we are probably all quite familiar with. It is, let's say, a Friday afternoon. You just heard about a new restaurant or cafe or something that you might like to go try out in downtown Sacramento. And you pull up Google Maps and you see that it might take anywhere between half an hour to an hour to get there. And you think, you know, I just don't know that I want to spend an hour in that congested traffic over the causeway. So you think about what your options are. So you maybe toggle over to transit, and you see, oh, you know, you can actually get there in maybe half an hour if you hop on Capitol Corridor. Then you can get to that new spot you're interested in maybe 35 minutes. And that's because you get to zip by all of that traffic on the causeway and walk to your spot that you're interested in going to downtown. And this is what we can see is because of this congested condition. If you were to say go to lunch at that spot when it's not an off-peak, when it's not a peak time, you'd be looking at something from 20 minutes to maybe 35. And if it took only 20 to 35 minutes, maybe you would make that trip. Maybe instead of being that once every few months trip, you would go there downtown because you actually really tried it out and you found out you love it. It's your new favorite spot. So you'd go there every few weeks. This is something that we grapple with all the time as people moving about the world. And it's this function of the capacity of our transportation network and the volume of driving on our transportation network, or the volume of cars, and it impacts how we make choices. And if you are a transportation engineer, been around this world, this might sound like I'm throwing out some familiar terms. Congestion we can think of as a function of vehicle volume over capacity. So how we try to address our congestion problems, how traditionally we've tried to address our congestion problems as transportation planners, and how we have historically tried to do that is by looking at the roadway capacity and saying, look, we just have too many cars for this given area. Let's expand our roadway capacity so that cars can operate more freely. They can go a little faster. And sure enough, in the short run, we do oftentimes see these faster travel speeds. You can go faster because there's this new capacity that these cars can now occupy. It shortens that travel time a little bit. So now you can maybe go grab that 20-minute, 35-minute trip to Sacramento from Davis. And you have that slightly less congestion in that short run time period. And that actually gets us to another change in behavior where people drive more. There is this new driving that's created by those shorter times and less congested conditions. And we get into this feedback loop actually, where new driving actually creates congestion again, because there are these new trips on the road. There are I'll get into the causes of this, but we get into a feedback loop where that reduced congestion and lower time cost of driving actually increases it brings about new driving, and we can see the increase of congestion. We see congestion tick back up, and we see this process happen over and over again. This relationship can be explained by economic principles, the building blocks of economics, supply and demand. And this is a relationship of the cost of something. In this case, we're thinking about the cost of driving, or as we all love to say, VMT. The cost of driving, which we measure in time, and its relationship with driving. So with VMT, so the cost of something and the amount of something. And so in these kind of high cost situations, we see in the upper left, you get people demand smaller amounts of things. Something's really expensive, you tend to demand less of it. And when something is less expensive, kind of over on that, on the bottom half of our curve, you see over in that bottom right, you see when something is cheaper, we demand more of it. It's got the idea of buy low, sell high. Something's on sale, it decreases the cost of something, and we buy more of it. And then the supply of our transportation system, we can think of as, we supply a transportation system, our road system, our bus system, our transit system, our bicycle systems. And that impacts the cost of our transportation as well. So when we have our demand and supply, we find equilibrium at some sort of, at that meeting point of our demand and supply curves. And that reaches some sort of quantity of VMT that is a result of that. And when we think about increasing capacity, what we're doing is we're shifting the supply curve. We have a new supply curve altogether. And what we see is we reach a new equilibrium point of the amount of driving that is consumed, because that increased capacity means lower time cost. And that shift in VMT is what we call the induced travel, what we call induced travel, that increase in VMT from a lower cost. So where does this new VMT come from? There are both short and long-term behavioral changes that induce VMT. There could be longer trips. In that case that I drew up for us, maybe instead of going to your spot in downtown Davis that you used to go to, you drive across the causeway to Sacramento. Maybe instead of it being a special thing that you do every few months for birthdays or what have you, you go every few weeks because you found your new spot and you can get there a little more quickly. You shift modes because instead of taking the train, which was pretty competitive compared to congested conditions, you drive, you don't take the train. And then there are things like route shifting. There are also long-term effects. Household or business relocation that comes about throughout that metro region. Let's say someone who currently lives in Sacramento moves to Davis because they know they can still get back to their favorite spot every so often, but they want to take advantage of the lovely bikeability of Davis. And also we see induce migration to the area, which increases demand for transportation in that area. So in the long run, we actually, I promise this is the last time I'm going to show a supply and demand curve. But what we see in that long run effect is in fact a shift in not only the supply curve, but also the demand curve. And perhaps sprawl, the new folks in a region, the moving around of businesses. Let's say a business moves further down a highway because now the accessibility is better, so they can go locate further down a highway and their employees can still get there. Those are all things that increase demand. They shift the demand curve for driving. And so we not only get those short run effects in that first arrow, but we get a long run effect in VMT, in induced travel. That's the basic gist, a very quick overview of supply and demand. This relationship is measured and really well documented in the academic research. So I will not go through these in detail, but a whole lot of different types of data and a lot of different methods have been used to actually measure, not just kind of theorize, but actually measure the effect of induced travel in various metropolitan statistical areas, urban areas throughout the United States. It's also been measured elsewhere in other countries and other continents. And the results are essentially that what we get is that a capacity expansion increases VMT at about a 1-to-1 ratio. So, and that is between a lane mile increase and VMT. So we're seeing in that short run, we get about a 3 to 6% increase in short run VMT over those long-term horizons of about 10 years. We're seeing all of the VMT that we were hoping to, all of that congestion that we were hoping to decrease has essentially come back onto the roadway. And the impacts is that where our congestion problem actually has not been solved. We cannot build our way out of it because of the changes in travel behavior that it spurs. So generally, we don't get much effect in the long run in terms of decrease in congestion. And a lot of those impacts that we're trying to solve, like air quality in certain corridors, that comes back along with it. And so essentially what we see in this research is that the driving increases along with capacity. I will hand it over to Jamie to show a few examples from California and closer to home.
Thanks, Amy. Can we just quickly go back 2 slides to the table of the induced travel studies?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the studies here that Amy mentioned, and on the next slide too, where you have the summary of the short-term and long-term elasticities. So these studies use decades of data and robust statistical methods to estimate average elasticities across generally urbanized areas. Most of these studies are nationwide, but there is also California-specific study that estimates similar elasticities in California's urbanized counties. And so in short, just to reemphasize what Amy just showed, there is strong, very strong empirical evidence of a large average induced travel effect in urbanized areas across the US and also California specifically. Now, because these studies present average effects across geographies and facility types, they don't, unfortunately, tell us how much induced travel was produced by specific roadway projects, nor do they tell us whether the induced travel effect differs between general purpose lanes, HOV lanes, HOT lanes, and purely toll lanes. And that's obviously of primary interest here for the Causeway project. But there is a recent study from researchers at UC Berkeley that helps answer those questions. And they do so with a study of 4 capacity expansion projects across California, 2 in Southern California and 2 in Northern California. All right, Amy, if you could advance to, yeah, here we go. All right, so here is this is from their report, which just came out in 2021. And this is just a map that shows the locations of the facilities that they studied and the control facilities they looked at as well, just to see if the effects they were looking at were happening on facilities that were not expanded. And so what they did in this study is Michael Anderson, a professor at UC Berkeley, and his colleagues used Caltrans loop detector data to compare traffic flows before and after recent lane additions on 4 California freeways. So you can see, hopefully you can make out from these maps here, but the 4 projects were first in the left-hand map, the top of that map, there's the Caldecott Tunnel on State Route 24 in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And so what happened there is they added 2 new general purpose lanes in 2013 through what is called the 4th bore. So there were 3 existing tunnels. They added a 4th tunnel, which basically added 1 additional lane of traffic in the non-peak commute direction, non-peak direction. And then the second project they looked at was an expansion on I-215 in San Bernardino County, which is in the right-hand map on the right side of that map. And that added 1 new general purpose lane and 1 new HOV lane back in 2010. The third project, again in Alameda County, is I-580, and that added 1 new hot lane in 2016. And then finally, in Orange County in 2014, an HOV lane along with some new connectors were added to I-405. And so all of these projects, these were all kind of traditional bottleneck areas, just kind of like the Causeway is now. And what Michael Anderson and his colleagues were trying to do is kind of fill that gap in the research, look at can we discern if there's a different elasticity for different types of facility expansions? So does it make a difference if it's a general purpose lane addition? Is it an HOV lane addition, HOT lane? And they also wanted to just kind of ground truth a little bit. So obviously these empirical studies that show average elasticities are very well done. A lot of data, very strong, robust econometric techniques. But again, they provide an average effect. And so what this study does is provide some kind of specific examples to kind of illustrate on a ground truthing level whether there's an induced travel effect from specific facility expansions. All right, Amy, next slide, if you want. Thank you. And so what they found, and so they looked, instead of looking at VMT, they looked at a proxy for VMT, which is flow, traffic flow on these facilities, right around where the capacity expansions were. And they found flow increases on all the facilities. And they also ran some regression analyses to calculate implied elasticities. And you can see those bolded in the left-hand column there. And so you'll note that these are lower than the elasticities, the long-term elasticities estimated in the econometric studies that Amy discussed a few slides back. But you have to bear in mind that the elasticities estimated in the UC Berkeley study are the short-term elasticities. So Amy, if you could switch over to the next slide. All right, perfect. So you can see here now bolded in the left-hand column, that is the term, the time period for the elasticity. So these UC Berkeley researchers were estimating an elasticity on the order of 1 to 2 years rather than the long-term elasticities of 5 to 10 years estimated in kind of the best econometric elasticity studies that we have in nationwide and with California. And so this indicates, you know, that you're going to have elasticities of between 1.5 and 0.8 after just 1 to 2 years. And as the authors of the study themselves noted, these are in line with other estimates of short-term elasticities and probably would increase to, you know, in that same region, that same 1.0 elasticity region in the long term. And another thing to note, besides the elasticities and the time period for those, is you can see that the elasticities are greater for the managed lane additions than for the general purpose addition. So the one project that had just general purpose lanes, that was the 4th bore on the Caldecott Tunnel, the top row here in this slide. And that had the lowest elasticity. And now there are reasons for this, just based on the lanes in the Caldecott Tunnel were in the non-commute direction. But as the authors conclude, I won't go into all of the specifics about it. But as the authors conclude overall, Amy, could you switch to the next slide? This is what they said. They said, overall, we find that the implied elasticities are similar across different types of lane expansions, and in all cases within the range of estimates from previous studies. And so this is kind of a first cut analysis using projects from California that looks at whether the induced travel effect occurs when you just expand lanes that manage lanes as opposed to general purpose lanes, and also takes a look at specific facilities. And the specific facilities, the elasticities were all in line with the existing research, the existing average effects. And they also show that across facility types, the elasticities are quite similar. And so that obviously has implications for using managed lanes to meet greenhouse gas emission and air quality reduction goals, meet VMT reducing goals. Amy, could you go to the next slide? And you know, as a result of these studies, all of the nationwide studies and these more recent studies that show maybe a similar induced elasticity from HOV and HOT lanes to general purpose lanes, you know, we've crafted at UC Davis, the National Center for Sustainable Transportation, an induced travel calculator that estimates the amount of VMT that would be induced by adding capacity to a class 1, 2, or 3 facility in California, and doing so with a general purpose lane, HOV lane, or an HOT lane. And based on the research, you know, we apply basically the same elasticity regardless of the project type, whether it's the lane type, whether it's HOV HOT, or general purpose, though there is a different elasticity that's applied to class 2 and class 3 lanes. So kind of state highways and major arterials. The one thing that we don't have a lot of evidence for in terms of induced travel and the elasticity is toll lanes, strict toll lanes. So in that situation, you don't have users who are just carpool able to join the lane. The actual use of the lane is fully determined by the price at which you're charging entry to the lane. And so there's not a lot of data on that. However, there is some evidence from a recent study in Europe that shows that when you're doing a toll lane, you can actually significantly reduce induced travel. And so, from our research, we believe generally, and that's why we have this in the calculator, that regardless of a general purpose HOV or HOT lane, all of those will kind of lead to the same induced travel. But there is an open question as to what would happen, what the elasticity would be with a strict toll lane. And so, talking about kind of managing VMT, going with a strict toll lane has probably the lowest induced travel and induced GHG emissions, induced air quality problems. Probably has the least chance of that. And beyond that, regardless of whether you're doing an HOT lane, an HOV lane, or a toll lane, if you can somehow expand transit with that, and I know that's an option for this project, facilitate transit, that could have benefits of switching people into transit and away from driving. And it can also have some positive equity implications for people who can't afford to drive with cars. Same goes for working on expanding active travel here. Unfortunately, with the available research, we're not able to predict the differences in induced travel for these various options. As far as we're able to go, based on the research that we've kind of summarized here, is that there's probably a similar induced travel effect from adding capacity on general purpose lanes, HOV lanes, or HOT lanes. And that approach, based on this literature, has been vetted by numerous other experts. And indeed, Amy, you could go to the next slide, has been actually adopted by Caltrans as their recommended approach for calculating the induced travel effect of new highway capacity expansions. And so they, in Caltrans, in its transportation analysis framework that it published in late 2020, they recommend using the NCST, the UC Davis induced travel calculator where feasible to estimate the induced travel effect.
And Jamie, I'm gonna say, I think we need to wrap up pretty soon so we can get to our other speakers.
Sounds good. I just wanted to show that I mentioned that there are these offshoots of our induced travel calculator you might see floating around out there as well, and they are all based in kind of the similar literature. So there's a shift calculator we helped develop with RMI and NRDC. RMI did its own calculator for Colorado, and there's also a kind of one-off adaptation for Portland, Oregon, among others. So you might see those. They're all kind of based in the same research. All right, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Amy and Jamie, for that presentation. We're going to keep moving forward. I know there's a lot there, and I'm sure we all have questions, but we're going to keep moving forward. As Don mentioned, I think there's a lot of connections between these different presentations. So I next want to welcome Mark Linsenmeyer, who is the Deputy Director for Express Lanes and Shared Mobility at LA Metro. Of course, we all know LA Metro, they're the countywide transportation authority for Los Angeles, the third largest transit system in the country, and they also are the transportation authority. So similar to YCTD, both a transit provider and a transportation planner for Yolo, for Los Angeles County. And Mark's going to tell us about how they've integrated transit into their express lane network. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Autumn. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, and we can see your slides.
Oh, perfect. System works. Again, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to the rest of the presentations as well as the folks from Davis. So that was great. Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background on the metro system, and then kind of focus the presentation on some of our transit rewards and subsidy programs that we fund through the express toll lanes. Just as background for those that don't know, we currently operate 2 express lanes, one the east-west corridor on I-10 and a north and south corridor on Interstate 110. They've been in operation 8-9 years. By many measures, they've been quite successful. We do have dynamically priced toll lanes. I can talk a little bit more about that as I walk through this. But essentially, we don't have any fixed prices, but it's based on the level of congestion or density on the express lanes. Just to talk a little bit about what we do at Metro, we always like to start with the fact that our express lanes are self-sustaining, in as much as we don't get any resources from the agency in terms of any of our sales taxes, Self-Help County and Los Angeles. So we do have 4 half-cent sales taxes, but the express lanes are all self-funded. Since its inception in 2012, which was our fiscal year 2013, we've seen steady increases in volume for the throughput, both in vehicles and people in the express lanes. I got FY20 on here, which obviously is when it starts to dip. But that was, I think, as a result of the pandemic and not necessarily additional congestion. The graphic on the right kind of just shows how we've weathered the COVID pandemic and the resiliency of the express lanes, both in terms of carrying vehicles and people through the corridors, as well as the revenue. As you can tell, in sort of March, April of 2020, when our first stay-at-home orders really took place, we had massive drops in volume across the network, across the system, throughout all the roads in Los Angeles County. The express lanes, our volumes dropped to about 20% of what we typically see. The resulting revenues dropped even further. However, after the initial sort of jolt from those stay-at-home orders, traffic started coming back fairly steadily, between 1% and 2% a week throughout the pandemic. We had another dip in January of 2021, when our second stay-at-home order tightened things back down, and then we've been growing back up to basically pre-COVID levels by late December of 2021. Although interestingly, again, the last 10 days or so, we've seen another dip south. So we continue to have impacts from COVID, but in general, the lanes have been pretty resilient. Again, I talked about the demand responsiveness to our pricing. We call it dynamically priced. It's based on real-time traffic, updated every 5 minutes. We charge based on the time and point of entry of what the lanes were at that point. During the peak periods, the base price, the floor of the pricing is 35 cents per mile, and it can go up to $2.10 per mile, depending on how much congestion and density we see in those lanes. If it gets overly saturated, we convert it back to an HOV lane, restricting all the paid vehicles from those lanes. Just to talk about the concept of operations, and this was really just to show our transponder. We do have a self-selecting, self-representing transponder, where you can either select a solo driver, an HOV2 or an HOV3, and depending on where you are, you select that and can either travel for free or pay the posted toll rate. Obviously, the other piece of this is that all the HOV vehicles or users that had access to the lanes before we converted still have that same access for free. So we didn't change anybody's usage. We just, again, as the vernacular on express lanes goes, we're selling the unused capacity, so the space between vehicles that wasn't being used. What we've been able to achieve through the revenues that the express lanes generate has allowed us to do a couple of different things. The first one I'll talk about is our net toll revenue reinvestment program. And this program is a grant-funded program from solely from our express lanes revenue, our net revenues. And it awards any any mobility improvement projects within a 3-mile corridor of either the 10 or the 110. We've had a couple rounds so far, totaling just under $50 million, and about 40 different projects sharing that 50 million. So it's been very successful. We anticipate to going out again in the next 12 to 24 months with an additional round. Even though we've been doing this program for about 8 years, 7, 8 years. Not all the projects have been completed yet, so we're still waiting for some of those 2016 awards to sort of get completed before we go out with another round. But hopefully you can see clear enough on the graphic that it's distributed pretty well between the east and west I-10 corridor and the north-south one. Got a lot of interest in it. The way we fund the program is basically targeting the different modes that we like to see awarded. And we've set targets at 40% go to transit projects, 40% to system connectivity, active transportation projects. We've got examples of each on the bottom. And then we do 20% essentially to Caltrans off the top for roadway improvements, including some of the incident management, signal syncs, intelligent transportation systems that help improve mobility on the corridors. And so we've got a pretty good ratio of how we like to see the funds being spent. In addition to the net toll revenue grant program, we also have a transit rewards program, also paid through the express toll lanes revenue. And this basically just rewards transit users that want to use the express lanes when they have a trip that they can't get to easily on transit, an appointment, an emergency, to work on time, whatever they might need to do, where they're normally taking transit, or we've encouraged them to mode switch to transit, but they'd still like to drive on occasion. We provide folks that take 16 transit trips a $5 toll credit. Our average toll is somewhere between $4 and $5 during peak. So it's about the price of one toll trip for 16 qualifying transit trips. And again, it's been well received. It's positive. We continue to tinker with it, both in the number of transit trips, and continue to evaluate whether the $5 toll credit's the right amount. You know, we don't like to give too much of a toll credit because it creates incentive disruption on our algorithm as we set the pricing based on demand on those corridors. Another thing that we do is provide direct transit subsidies to different users, different transit systems that operate on the express lanes. We have 4 operators that run routes across the express lanes. The top one on the line here is the Metro J line, the silver streak that we've had for a number of years. Then we've had the Foothill Transit also operating on our line. I took this picture of the Foothill Transit bus. That's another bus that the express lanes net toll revenue grants paid for. It's an all-electric double-decker bus. They bought 2 of them with our express lanes funds. And likewise, Torrance Transit and Gardena Transit also operate on the lanes. We've had similar subsidies going to them for different procurements for buses as well. Over the years, since 2015, we've spent about $55.6 million on these direct subsidies, which not only help defray operating costs, improve headways, increase reliability for those services, but also are able to get more buses on the road during those peak times, so that we can encourage people to have, you know, reasonable, reliable choices for traveling, not just relying on the automobile. And so between the net toll revenue grants and the direct transit subsidies, we're just over 100 million in total for the program, and it's, you know, 9 year history. We also offer a low income assistance program. I think there's going to be other speakers talking about this, so I'll just kind of mention that we have that as well. Let's see, what else do I got? Whoops, got a little crazy with it. I'm going backwards. Okay, there we go. Oh, also have the Clean Air Vehicle Program. Again, we just offer a discount for the clean air vehicles. Obviously, they can access the lanes. If they are an account holder, we give them a discount. It's fairly modest. It's what our board approved. And so we continue to use it. We continue to support it. but they still do pay a fee. We're also members of the California Toll Operators Committee, which are all the member agencies that work in concert with one another, not only for interoperability, but for also making sure that we're all talking with each other and all understand both our needs and our future planning goals to help with interoperability. And again, I'll end with just looking at the future corridors in LA County, the success of the 10 and the 110, both from a congestion relief standpoint, as well as hopefully some of the other improvements we've made on the transfer of funds from vehicle users to transit users, HOV users, has led our board to ask us in 2017 to go out and find additional corridors that we might be able to convert from HOV to HOT and what that might look like. And as you can see, we were able to identify a number of valid corridors. I think certainly the initial tiers all had HOV lanes that were able to convert, and so we're working actively on that. Right now, we're just starting the design process after we cleared the environmental process on the 105. Do have tolling authority on that from the CTC back in 2019. So we'll hopefully open the 105 corridor in time for the LA Olympics. I guess I'll do my 1 second marketing spiel on that too in 2028. And then the next ones are all the I-10 extension out to the San Bernardino County line to meet the San Bernardino I-10 express lanes from their service into LA County. And then we're working on the I-405 corridor, which is famously congested corridor in the LA basin. And that's all I have. I have questions here, but we'll wait till the end of the presentation for that, I guess. I'm happy to hang around.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you hanging around. Thanks for that presentation. And just to reiterate, yeah, I do see there's a couple of hands up. We will have opportunity for public comment, and that can include questions of the panelists when we get there. But for now, we're going to go to our next speaker. Very happy to introduce Krista Cassidy. Krista is a planner with HNTB, who is contract staff for the San Mateo County Express Lanes Joint Powers Authority. And she's going to talk to us about the equity program that they are implementing there on the 101 Express Lanes. Over to you, Krista.
Thanks, Autumn. Let's see here if I can get my presentation mode going. Let's see. Let's do full screen here. Let's see. Are you seeing a full screen, or are you seeing?
We're seeing your notes, and I feel like this is what always happens to me too.
I might just, let's see here. I might just make this small, if that's not too distracting. Does that work?
For me.
Okay. Yep. Great. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to tell you a little bit more about the San Mateo 101 Express Lanes Community Transportation Benefits Program, newly branded. So let's get started. I'm going to run us through the 101 Express Lanes project, just to give you a little background, the equity study that we conducted, just give you an overview of that, and then tell you about the resulting equity program. Let's see here. Oh, sorry. A couple screens going. So just to give you a sense for who the key players are, the 101 Express Lanes in San Mateo County is governed by the San Mateo County Express Lanes JPA board. And that board is supported by the policy program manager, which is HNTB, who I'm representing today, and then the JPA Executive Council, and that is comprised of the City County Association of Governments of San Mateo County and the San Mateo County Transit Authority. And it's sort of the joining of two different agencies. So I just wanted to make that clear, sort of who's involved. The 101 Express Lanes project was really born out of a recognition that congestion on the US 101 was continuing to worsen, is continuing to worsen as employment and housing and population growth all increases. And by 2040, San Mateo County is expected to see an additional 135,000 jobs and 60,000 new households. And there's currently very little incentive for people to rideshare within the 101 corridor in San Mateo County. So as a result, vehicle trips are expected to increase. And there's actually quite a big issue with spillover traffic into surrounding communities as a result. We've talked a little bit about this. I think Mark really teed me up for this, but I'll just quickly run through what an express lane is. It's in this case, it's buses, vans, and carpools of 3 or more people using the lane for free. Carpools with 2 or more people receiving a discount, and then other drivers in single occupancy vehicles paying to use the lane, choosing to pay to use the lane with dynamic tolls and dynamic prices that change throughout the day, depending on, oops, I think these are supposed to be hidden. Depending on just the flow. So why did the JPA decide on an express lane and not a carpool lane? Well, so through some modeling work, they found that essentially with a regular HOV 2+ carpool lane, there were too many vehicles. With the HOV 3+, there were too few vehicles, and that with the express lane, the pricing really helped balance it out in such a way that the number of single occupancy vehicles that were accessing the express lane means that the lane was going to operate right at around, at or above 45 miles per hour, which is considered the minimum free flow speed by federal standards. So the thing is, express lanes and congestion pricing schemes generally tend to raise a number of equity concerns. So there are concerns that the pricing is seen as a regressive fee, a regressive charge. There's concerns about those who are unbanked or underbanked being able to access the lanes due to technological barriers with the way that people pay for the lanes. There's a potential for more benefits to accrue to higher income drivers. This idea of express lanes being, quote unquote, Lexus lanes. And then there are environmental justice impacts on surrounding communities around lanes if they're indeed building a new lane. So the JPA, they commissioned a study from Arup, and Arup was the lead consultant, and then Estelano Advisors was the sub-consultant conducting community engagement, and Autumn and I were key staff on this when we both worked at Arup. And so the intention of the study was to develop an equity program that provides meaningful mobility benefits to historically underserved communities within the county. And what we wanted was for the resulting program to be flexible so that it can evolve over time. And especially as we're living through a pandemic and the communities that we're focused on in this study are being the hardest hit by COVID, what works for them this year might not work for them in 2025. And so we want to be able to keep this flexible to meet community needs. The actual express lanes revenue will depend on the use of tolls and other factors. And so more revenue could be available in the future when other financial commitments like the loan for construction on the express lanes has been met. So if it's not clear, the revenue from the express lanes is meant to fund this forthcoming equity program. So I just wanted to take a minute to walk you through the equity study process that we went through in order to get to our final preferred equity program. We first developed a vision and desired outcomes with the JPA board's blessing, and then we embarked on a first phase of community outreach to really understand what transportation challenges were for folks in San Mateo County. We did a full scan of existing local studies to just piggyback on any other community outreach that had been done to understand what kind of needs we could meet through the revenue from the express lanes. We defined those targeted communities. We did a full literature review on congestion pricing and equity, and then from there, we're able to develop 10 preliminary alternatives. And we screened those through a variety of different metrics like alignment with community feedback or the ease of implementation. And we developed 4 alternatives from there. And those were, the first one was an express lanes benefit, so money to use the express lanes, a transit benefit, which is money to use transit, place-based improvements, so things like improving a sidewalk in an underserved community or putting in a bus shelter. And the last one was a carpool rewards program. And so from there, we took those alternatives and we brought them back out to the community to understand, what resonates, what sounds good, what's going to really meet your needs. And we also did a technical evaluation to see how these alternatives performed through qualitative and quantitative metrics that we had developed. And that's how we got to our preferred program alternative. I thought it might be interesting for this group to just get some high level insight into what we heard in that outreach. So in the first phase, when we were identifying the community challenges, what we heard was that the main challenges were around unreliable public transportation, a high cost of transportation, both for drivers and transit users, specifically related to Caltrain, and then too much traffic. And then when we put forth the 4 equity program alternatives, what we heard were that the money for express lanes use and for transit had the most support, and particularly a hybrid of these alternatives, but that the amount that we were proposing, $50, was too low to be meaningful. We did perform a technical evaluation. This map shows the targeted geographies that we identified as priorities for the study. They were selected based on their proximity to the freeway, and then a number of other demographic characteristics like income or minority population. But we did not end up limiting eligibility for the program based on these areas. This was really just for analysis only. So the one thing that I did want to spend a minute on here were some of our findings from the literature review, and I'll just highlight 3 of them, and you'll have this in your board packet to look at later. But the 3 things that I think are sort of interesting to highlight on our scan of congestion pricing and equity literature is that 1, congestion pricing schemes are generally more equitable than the status quo of unpriced roads. 2, that revenue redistribution is key to equitable outcomes. And then 3, that low-income drivers are a small share of peak period traffic, and therefore they are less likely to pay the highest tolls. And so where we landed was with this program that we are calling the 101 Express Lanes Community Transportation Benefits Program, which provides the option of either a Clipper card, so transit pass for the 20-something transit agencies in the 9 counties, that has a value of $100, and that's an annual recurring benefit, or a fast track toll transponder with a value of $100. This is a one-time benefit. And so the bottom line is that this program is intended to provide choice, and the choice is a direct outcome of the community engagement that we did and an understanding that there's no one right benefit for everybody. People are eligible if they are a resident of San Mateo County, if they're 18 and older, if they are receiving at least one benefit already through the Core Services Network Agency, which is a network of social services agencies in the county, or if they have an individual income at or below 60% of the county AMI, which is $76,000. So we are partnering with the Samaritan House, which is for the program administration. They are the leading social services agency in San Mateo County. They know who the community is, who's coming in to seek benefits. We're really, they're experienced in administering benefits to this population and the people who need help most. And so it's intended to meet people where they are, where they're already going and seeking support for food or housing. This provides sort of another benefit around transportation that didn't previously exist. So Samaritan House is going to be this public face of the program. They're going to promote and educate their clients about the program. They're going to enroll people in the program. They're really going to help us make this a big success, because that's not in our wheelhouse to do it. And they know the folks that are seeking the services most. I wanted to give you a sense for the data that we're collecting sort of in service to this notion of the program being iterative and always sort of being flexible to meet changing community needs. So we'll do sort of the standard demographic data collection, but we're also doing a heavy amount of qualitative data collection that the program associates at the Samaritan House and the other social services networks will be collecting. So it'll be how are you using this benefit? If you're selecting the fast track benefit, what would it take for you to take bus or rail instead of a car? Do you have a smartphone? And if so, what would you be able to use a transportation app? Really trying to get a better sense for who's using this program and what their needs really are, and if we can adapt the program in some way to better meet those needs. So this is my last slide here. It's just wanted to give you a sense for where we are in the process. We are doing a training of Samaritan House this month. Next month, Samaritan House is going to do a training with those other 7 service agencies in the county. The express lanes will open in mid-February. The Community Transportation Benefits Program is going to launch in late February, and then next year we'll evaluate the program impact, and then we'll update it based on the feedback that we've heard. So I'm really happy to be able to share the program with all of you today. I'm excited to hear some of your questions, and thanks for bearing with me with some of these screen sharing issues I was having.
Great. Thank you so much, Krista. It's just very exciting to hear how that program is continuing to evolve, and I think a really exciting model. So great to have you with us. So our final speaker is Christina Spence from SACOG. Of course, I know many of you know her. She is the Director of Transportation for SACOG, and she's going to talk to us briefly about the regional context for the Yolo 80 Managed Lanes project, and also thoughts about opportunities to fully fund the project and move it forward. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you. Let me share my screen, and hopefully I share the right one. Are y'all seeing my slides?
Yep, we see them.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me today, and thanks to everybody who presented before me. There was a lot of really great information. I know I was taking some notes, as were, I'm sure, some of my colleagues that were listening. Lots of great stuff to share. So as Autumn mentioned, I am going to be talking about the Yolo 80 improvement project and a little bit of our strategy, and at least our thinking of where we might go to fill a funding gap. So as we all know, the project was recently awarded an infra grant from the federal government of about $86 million, which left a funding gap of about $40 million when you look at the actual scope of the project. The project's EIR, which is currently underway, actually analyzes a broader scope, or a broader project than what was scoped for that grant application. And it included elements like toll lanes, regional express bus service, and some additional safety improvements for bicycles. So a lot of what some of the previous speakers were talking about. And this is really key in the ability for YCTD, Caltrans, and SACOG to expand funding options to help fill that gap and then some. And kind of really important to note here too is that this project is really a massive investment and is a prioritized project in the Mega Region Initiative, which looks at connecting multiple regions in Northern and Central California. So managed lanes with pricing, like some of the previous examples, are critical elements of our region's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. So in our view, they're vital components of GHG reduction strategy, mostly because they have positive influence and impacts to our ability to provide high frequency transit service in the region. So essentially, as others noted, the highway network will not only help feed the demand for increased transit service, but can help generate revenues that will help pay for the operation. So from a funding strategy and opportunity perspective, we're at somewhat of an advantage in that the new federal programs emerging from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, have increased focus on core concepts like equity, air quality, climate resiliency, among others, all things that California has already prioritized. So to begin thinking about a funding strategy, we'll need to think about our project and focus on the strengths and the desired outcomes and how they align with some of these federal priorities. This helps tighten up the ask, so to speak, and hone in on some of the key concepts that we think will increase competitiveness among those programs. What we really want to do is make sure that we're consistent and complementary to federal, state, and regional goals. So those 5 circles that you see there on the bottom, those are some of the federal pillars and federal goals with programs. So the current phase of the project, as I mentioned, was funded by INFRA, which is a major federal infrastructure program. We have the ability to look to additional federal programs that are emerging from the IIJA that could be leveraged. There's a whole bunch of new programs that are coming out. We're all still learning about what those programs are. and what the timing is on them. But there are a few that we think could potentially be leveraged for this project. And I'm only going to highlight a few of them on here. So the mega region, or the mega projects, excuse me, is a new competitive program that's geared towards really complex projects that have the potential to generate national and regional economic mobility or safety benefits. And they might include highway or bridge projects or public transportation projects, among others. This source might be a bit challenging because there is a specific minimum dollar amount that may exceed that gap that we're looking to fill, but there's still kind of more to come on this as we learn more about it, and what I will speak to in a few moments of really defining the project and really trying to understand what it is that we're trying to get at. Because if there are additional elements in the EIR that we want to add into the project, we might need more than that $40 million funding gap. So there's options. Build or raise are some additional major infrastructure programs that could be utilized. RAISE is something that's familiar to YCTD. They were just awarded some funds for the trail project. Congratulations, by the way. But this could be an option for certain aspects of the project. You know, we have to be cognizant to the fact that there was just an award, so we don't know how they will take to, you know, back-to-back awards, but we don't want to write that one off yet. Another interesting one is the PROTECT grants. Those are new. It stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. So these can be used for projects that enhance resiliency of infrastructure assets, including projects that improve the resilience of surface transportation assets and evacuation routes. So there could be some elements of the program or the project that could qualify for that type of funding as well. And lastly, Congestion Relief Program, which provides competitive grants for projects in large urbanized areas to advance innovative, integrated, and multimodal solutions to congestion relief. So the goals are really what are consistent with the goals of our project, which is to reduce highway congestion, increase economic and environmental benefits, and reduce costs related to congestion, and optimize existing highway capacity and usage of our transit system. There's a whole slew of things that could be included under that type of project, and it could be deployment and operation of mobility services, or systems that implement or enforce high occupancy vehicle toll lanes, cordon pricing, parking pricing, congestion pricing. There's a whole bunch. So there's a lot of opportunity there on the federal side. There is also opportunity on the state and regional side. So within SB1, which we all know is our state program here with the gas tax, there's two key programs that we would be looking at. There is the Solutions for Congested Corridors, which is a competitive grant program that invests in multimodal solutions on highly congested corridors like I-80. There's also the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which is another competitive program, and that's the state's version of infra, basically. And both of those are administered by the California Transportation Commission. We at SACOG hold a regional funding program, which is another option. We're kind of in a unique position as a state where a substantial share of federal funds are apportioned to the state and then sub-allocated by formula to MPOs. So what we do is we pull together, excuse me, federal and state funds for a biennial funding round, and we administer that as a competitive grant program. We are currently finalizing our timeline and plan for this upcoming funding round, and that will likely span over 2022 and 2023. So for the next steps, we know we have options, but we really need to focus on how we move forward with a strategy. So from SACOG's perspective, I would say that the first step is to continue working together as a region. Partnership is going to be incredibly important for any future funding that we are trying to go after. SACOG, as our MPO here in the region, is wholly committed to working with YCTD and Caltrans, who's an incredibly important partner on this project, as we see this as very critical to our region. We also need to start to continue conversations with federal folks at the DOT as well as the CTC. So those folks can provide a lot of insight, a lot of feedback, and can give us some guidance on how we can and will eventually end up moving forward. And as I mentioned before, we need to take another look at the project. What was scoped, what was in the EIR, and really identify what's key for our ability to get more funding and what can make it more competitive. And then from there, we can collectively develop a funding strategy and hopefully obtain the necessary funding that we need to move forward with this project. It's going to be a very busy but competitive year for federal and state programs. So starting early is going to be really beneficial, which is why I kind of emphasize the partnership thing and starting now, building together. We anticipate that some of the federal programs are going to be coming out very soon. RAISE potentially is going to be released this month. Mega projects might be next month. So the clock is ticking. So having these kinds of presentations and these kinds of conversations is great. On the state side, SB1 programs will have a call for projects in the fall. So a little bit more time if that's the route that we think will be most viable for us. And then I mentioned our regional funding program will likely be this year and next year as well. So right now, it's more about just starting the conversations and working with our partners with Caltrans and YCTD and finding ways that we can support them from a regional perspective to strengthen their process and their strategy for moving forward. So trying to keep it a little bit lighter. You guys had a lot of information there with the previous speakers, which was awesome. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with everybody as we move forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Christina, and thank you everyone for your great presentations. And as I'm just happy to note that in addition to getting all that information, we're actually pretty much on schedule. So I want to turn it back over to our chair, Don, to lead us into a Q&A.
Thank you, Autumn, and thanks to every one of the speakers. This has been a delightful and very insightful set of presentations. Colleagues, I'd like to ask you to consider among the 13 or 27 questions that you have, that you kind of focus on the one most important question for you for now, and we'll do a round of questions of our presenters. We'll then go to Q&A, well, excuse me, then we'll go to public comment from members of the public, and I'm going to ask that they limit to 3 minutes, and then we'll come back to board discussion. So just as an example of how this might work, I'll ask one question. I'm doing that to give you a chance to think about what question you'd like to bring forward. My question is to Mark Linsemeyer. And Mark, my question for you is on transit. And my question is, how in the projects that you have moved forward with already and that you're considering, how do you advance the idea of transit? Or do you have infrastructure installations such as rapid bus, or do you have pricing strategies? Do you have automatic lighting that allows buses access to the lanes? What are you doing that actually folds in transit with your other aspects of your projects?
Sure, thank you, Supervisor. Yeah, so ours, like in Yolo County, right? We run both the transit operations and the express lanes. So it's easy to get those vehicles into our lanes from the metro perspective. We typically will run some sort of a license plate scan on all the vehicles that enter into it. We work closely with Foothill Transit District to allow their vehicles in. There's no priorities for any of those buses at the moment. Same with Gardena and Torrance. We do have all the plate information for all those vehicles, so they can get in and out seamlessly. We also allow them to deadhead in our lanes too as they're returning back to their operations office. So it works pretty well. But basically, it's always been our outreach and whatever we can do to communicate with the transit providers that are outside of Metro, although communication with inside of Metro is not always easy either. But typically, we do have calls certainly with Foothill on a monthly or more frequent basis to identify what we can do. You know, they've asked us in the past, and our board's asked us to look at ways to increase the reliability of their service, because one of the issues they have is if you're trying to convince people to take the bus instead of a car, but there's no time savings because everybody's stuck in the same traffic, how can they improve? And so we are doing a pilot program, or at least looking at it, to increase our occupancy to HOV5 on the I-10 express lanes. So that's currently underway. And, you know, I think both Metro and Foothill hope that that'll increase the viability of those transit services, the reliability, and, you know, ultimately induce more people into van pools and carpools.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Chris, do you have a question that you'd like to raise for any of the panel members?
Yeah, sure. I think it's for all of them. And good evening, and thank you for your time tonight, and certainly insights into each of your projects. But it kind of goes back to the last part of the presentation from Kristen and SACOG and the funding strategies that Kristen outlined. I think first of all, I appreciate the perspective and the many amount of thought you did in outlining sort of the various pots of money you're sort of identifying where we might be able to leverage this from. I'm just kind of curious to one of the other panels from one of the other agencies, as you pursued your projects, what were maybe some of the strategies you did where you might not have thought of a funding strategy or source was achievable, it helped you achieve that project, or a partnership you may have put together that may have helped put your project towards the right track to getting the infrastructure you needed for either the HOT lane or the managed lane or whatever. Is there some insight one of you might offer? Because I think that's an area where we're going to have to, I think our biggest challenge is to kind of close that gap. Did I stump the band tonight?
I think, Mark, you've got you've implemented projects. I think maybe the others have. Maybe I think you might be in the best position to do a response.
Sure. Happy to opine on it. Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, for us, certainly, we looked at the same list of grants and opportunities and funding that was presented earlier. You know, we had success at the state level with the SCCP funds on that recent round in 2019. We had a $150 million grant, which for our region was a pretty sizable grant. I guess that makes it for all regions a pretty sizable grant. But that worked out well. And then basically it was just showing all the benefits, not only from the benefit cost analysis that we have to put together, but also certainly the equity components are increasingly important when we go in front of CTC. And same with the Fed, you know, looking at infra and raise, and now we're into TIFIA negotiations with them. So we certainly want to make sure that we show not only the throughput from the people and vehicles perspective, but also the benefits to air quality and equity that are being asked of us. And, you know, again, the federal legislation and recent US DOT guidelines have made it clear that that's going to be an important consideration for all grants and I guess funding opportunities as I look at TIFIA for another piece of that. And again, our projects are a little bit unique at Metro because typically we have a wide array of different funding that we can use to fill different gaps. But since ours is primarily future toll revenues that we're looking at, we do stick our hand out for those grants at the state level and at the federal level, knowing that the costs for the loans are sizable, and whatever they can do to help us close that, either through a smaller raise or infra consideration, or a more considerable SCCP grant at the state level, helps our full funding program. And I think just demonstrating to them that we have the capability to deliver the project on time and on budget is the biggest part of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Tom? Thank you, Chris. And we'll go to Tom. Do you have a burning question, one of them?
well, I don't have a burning question, but it seems like this idea of demand pricing generates revenue to do projects where the revenue doesn't exist or whether there's a gap. So I didn't hear anybody disagreeing with that strategy. If anybody does, would they let me know right now?
I don't.
We resolved one question there, Don.
That's a good question. I think you got a good answer. Very good. Let's see, Matt Dulcich, do you have the top of your list of questions?
I think just maybe quick and maybe for Autumn is a question about tolling authority and thoughts on how to set that up. I've never contemplated that, so I wondered if you've put some thought into it yet.
I've done a little bit of thinking, and actually Christina's been a real thought partner in that as well. And we've had some conversations already we've reached out to MTC to understand a little bit more about their process and how they've done it and what the kind of opportunities are for leveraging existing toll authority like that they currently have in the Bay Area. And so it is there's a lot to it, and we could have a whole, I think, other workshop just on what it takes to set up a toll authority and to run it. But I would just say that there's different levels of there's different layers, down from actually having the authority to collect the toll revenue, which is something that needs to happen through enabling legislation, which would designate, an agency like YCTD to collect tolls, and then all the way down to the level of who is actually the one that's, collecting the revenue and, and setting up fast track accounts and all that sort of thing. So I think we would want to look at, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and do everything from scratch, we'd want to look at, particularly how could we leverage our partners to the west, MTC, particularly because we are the westernmost county in the SACOG region and really the connection point between, the SACOG region and MTC, to see what of those kind of functions we could leverage through MTC and then which ones we would want to do on our own. So I think that's definitely an important topic for future conversation and future discussion, if we decided that was an area we wanted to explore further.
Great, thank you.
Lucas?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick procedural question first, which is just assume that all these various presentations might be available later. Really like to be able to look at some of the slides in more depth and also in a little larger font, perhaps. Like, there's a quick example, like the Anderson study link that Amy and Jamie referenced. I would really like to get that. So, but the actual question would be to tag on to Matt's question there for Krista, just around, because I know that the San Mateo Express Lanes JPA just maybe 6 months ago just adopted their sort of tolling ordinance, and I'm curious, it sort of dovetails into Director Dulcich's question around tolling authority, or just, I guess, the enabling legislation has to happen first, then there's a process of sort of toll creation of an ordinance once that authority is in place. It's a question for Krista potentially, or maybe perhaps Autumn or anyone else who might have some thoughts on that as well too. Thank you.
I am probably not going to be your gal on answering that tonight, but I can definitely get you more information on it. There's, BATA is definitely in the mix with the San Mateo County Express Lanes JPA. And Autumn, you might recall from our engagement a little bit better what the organizational structure is there, but
no, BATA is the Bay Area Toll Authority, which is one of the many faces of MTC. And the Bay Area it has a unique configuration where there is, it's a little bit like that layer cake where we talked about, where San Mateo is kind of retaining, they are the toll authority for San Mateo County, but then they do partner with MTC BATA to do a lot of the operations and administration. So, and they do it a little bit different than Alameda County, which has a different relationship with MTC, and VTA has a separate relationship. So everybody in the Bay Area is kind of, there's a little bit of a pick your poison approach in the Bay Area as far as how much local authority and local control the agencies have versus having MTC kind of operate. There are some places where MTC is fully owning and operating the lanes as well. So it's a pretty, there's a lot, there's a lot there that we could get into, but I'm happy to follow up with Krista to get more detail on the San Mateo example.
Yep, I can do that for sure.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it very much.
Sure.
Good. Director Lauren?
Thank you so much, Chair Saylor. This is a really dynamic presentation, and I like the word dynamic right now because I never thought about the dynamic lanes in that way of, as a generator for projects and so forth. But one way that I'd like to think about whatever it is that we do is to which demographic is each decision positive, negative, neutral, and then if there's a generator, the same question of to what demographic would that be, positive, negative, or neutral? And I would hope that that would help drive our decision making. The equity component is the most interesting to me in the solving of the issues at hand. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Krista, do you have any comment on that? It sounds like that was probably a part of what the work that you all did. We can probably learn from on the questions Jesse's raising.
Yeah, I'd love to, think about lessons learned with all of you as you move forward with this. That was certainly top of mind as we were putting this together initially. Is who benefits, who's burdened, and how do you create a program that allows the benefits of the program to trickle sort of across all income levels. Was there a specific question that you'd like me to respond to?
I think that there was some discussion about how dynamic lanes, would be an advantage or a dynamic pricing of lanes. So no, not a specific question at this time. I think I don't think we're there yet.
But I think the one thing that I'll just mention in response to that is something I mentioned in our review of the literature around how, in terms of that dynamic pricing, that low-income drivers do tend to make up the smaller share of the peak period traffic, and so they're generally they're less likely to pay the highest tolls.
Perhaps in addition to the slides, if there are additional references that your work generated, that might be helpful for us.
Sure.
Greg Wong, do you have any question that's on the top of your list?
No, I don't. Those were some great presentations. I'm hoping my team out there is listening. I did let them know about these opportunities tonight, and definitely good pieces of information for our toolbox going forward.
Okay, Tom, you have your hand up. Do you have another question before we go to public comment? You're on mute, Tom.
I know you want to move on, Don, but until this discussion this evening, which I really value, I hadn't realized that what we're doing here should be perhaps prototypical of what might be happening elsewhere in the region, for example, on 5 and on 50. And so that's kind of enlarging my thought about all this. And, I think we need to be thinking about a model because we certainly don't want to have different systems on these different roadways in the region. It's hard enough for the citizens to keep it all straight. So I hope maybe Greg Wong will bring in that larger thought too. We have models around the state. Mark has given us one, but I know there might be others as well. So just a kind of an aha for me is this could be much bigger than just 80.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. I think I agree. So we have, we're going to have many more questions, friends, and we'll have time to unfold some of these. I think the insights that we have here, we'll do some kind of an additional round after we hear from public comment of just what are our insights and what are some discussion points. But before we do that, let's turn to public comment. And we have a few people. We have 23 attendees, and we have 3 who have asked to speak to us during public comment on this topic. So I'm going to ask that we have a timer, Daisy, if you could do that for 3 minutes, and we'll take them in the order that their hands appeared. And then what we'll do, we will focus on the comment, and if there's time, we may have some response, but we really don't have a lot of time for that. So our first one will be Paul Philly. And Paul, are you here with us? You're on, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Go ahead and start the time.
Thank you so much, Chair Saylor, directors of the board. I'm Paul Philly with the Sac Metro Air Quality Management District. Greetings from the other side of the river, but I'm actually a resident of Yolo County, full disclosure. And till about March of 2020, I used to take the 44 into town every day. And I'd actually take the Capitol Corridor back because of reliability issues of getting across the causeway. And one of the things that I'm here is to talk a little bit about helping our region meet its air quality goals and its climate goals. And you had excellent UC Davis staff, Amy Lee making Anthony Downs proud, showing many different charts, but we are talking about a highway expansion and we are going to have more vehicles moving because of that. And I'm sure our good friend from LA Metro, and my wife actually interned there way back in the long ago, but I have been on diamond lanes in Los Angeles County where it was actually more congested than the general purpose lanes. So something that we do see in the research is that if we do have multiple lanes operating in tandem, you will have more reliability, especially if you are using a dynamic pricing. So moving to a 2 lanes being managed instead of 1 lane in each direction being managed, where you actually convert a general purpose lane, we can start to perhaps offset some of the induced demand we would see otherwise. And we could also guarantee a lot more reliability in those managed lanes to get people across the causeway, which is, I think, something we're all interested in. The other things that I'd like us to start considering is, and I was really surprised we didn't have sort of a throughput versus speed chart, which I think was the only graph we didn't get to see during this fantastic presentation. But once you get the causeway breaking down to that stop and go traffic, very few cars are going through. And the more lanes that are managed and you can keep moving at least 40, 45 miles an hour, you're actually moving 2,000 vehicles, whether they're buses or cars or otherwise, per hour rather than a few hundred, which is what you get when you get to breakdown. So looking at ways to really ensure that our express buses, the Capitol Connector, all these investments we've made as a region can access the corridor, I think will really help drive the growth of the region, help connect the mega region, and also get us to a place where we can see more sustainable modes, because I think that's what the Air District is interested in, is really investigating ways to ensure that we have more sustainable modes.
Thank you. I appreciate your being with us, and you bring many perspectives. So keep in touch with us, okay? Our next speaker is Jeffrey Targhia. Jeffrey, are you with us? Can we allow him to speak, please?
There we go. Unmute. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Jeffrey. Good to see you.
Okay, thank you. I'm using a tablet, but one of this is striking.
Your time is starting with 3 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is directed to Metro, and because 20 some odd years ago, I was in the LA region, so would like to hear the difficulties, because I remember the first toll road was out there, I believe, the Riverside to 60. Would like to know what are the initial problems with the first setup, and the second has it pretty well established the same equipment, fast track, or is there different equipment being used, and how you flash sign difference in your rates rather than just simply one rate, and how you track it going in there? That's my questions. And I'm assuming this is just the costway.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think is that the end of your comment?
But excellent presentations. Like what you had to say, appreciated very much, and we'll still stay involved.
Very good. Thank you. And next commenter is Alan Hirsch. Can we make Alan so he can speak? Looks like, Alan, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I hope you have my slides in front of you. You all have my slides?
We've received your public comment and your slides.
See my slides? Thank you very much. First, I want to basically note that it's very clever that we should have tolls that we can tax people going to Tahoe to fund Yolo County projects. That's very clever. So that's a great way of source of funding, and we can make welfare payments to address the mitigation of that. But is any amount of money sufficient to mitigate for climate change for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In my slides, I point out, first slide is the #1 source of greenhouse gases in our state is transportation and driving. Slide number 2, it's clear that we need to reduce our driving by vehicle miles traveled cumulative for the state by 20%, which means 30% per capita. That's if we meet our climate change goals. It's not happening in the conference back in Scotland or whatever. This has to happen here in Yolo County. So anything that moves us away from maintaining the future for our great-grandchildren, our grandchildren, and our children, which we're threatening. So this next thing, I provide slides about the laws of transportation congestion. Slides 3, slide 4, slide 5. It pretty much echoes what we heard from UC Davis. We cannot build our way out of congestion ever. And any increase in capacity will encourage people to drive or to take transit or whatever. We're never going to eliminate congestion on the freeway. You cannot do that. We have population growth. It's not going to work. You're not going to build your way out of congestion. You can provide toll lanes so the rich can opt out, if that's your goal. And I'm sure there's some, I know there's lots of, the city manager of Davis, for example, lives in Folsom and Troots, and we will facilitate that. People who want to have less rich people who can want to go to Sacramento for the theater, we can facilitate that. They can buy out, and we can give some additional welfare to mitigate that. But it's not going to, our grandchildren or great-grandchildren are not going to think highly of us if this is what we leave by wider freeway. We add any capacity for cars, we are moving in the wrong direction, and toll lanes will do that. If it's, I know this is difficult for you. I know this is the last slide. Widening in the law of transportation, in 10 years, it'll be congested again. If we're short-term thinking, I know your constituents are frustrated by traffic congestion, but you are for the legacy. This is stewardship for the legacy. 2 of you on this board are retiring your final political position. You can do the right thing. You don't need to do constituents. You can do the right thing for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I urge you, do not expand the capacity of I-80. There are other ways of solving this problem. Anything that moves us the wrong direction. I know it's hard. I know you have constituents who are complaining about traffic on local streets, but this is the most important and most moral thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan, and I know you will remain involved with us as we go through the conversation and process. I think we've heard good comments, and we've heard a number of presentations. The board has asked some questions, and my hunch is that you have more that you'd like to raise, and I think that we will get the comments, we'll get the slides and some additional resource materials from these presenters for us.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we had a couple of just slides to kind of frame the conversation. Is this a good time for me to go ahead and bring those up?
It is, yes.
Okay, Daisy, can you go ahead and share the slideshow? And we can go to the the one slide back from there, slide 4. Thanks. So I just wanted to kind of offer. Oh, I think we've got the notes page. It always happens to me too. So yeah, we can leave it here if that's easier. Just wanted to remind the kind of the key elements that are on the table for the Yolo Managed Lanes project based on the project description that we currently have. These are just some of the pieces I would love for the board to reflect on as we think about, going forward. Ultimately, the final project that we want to select and move forward. A big piece of that is the lane management strategy, whether it's carpool, express lane, or bus only lane. And there's flavors of express lane, right, that we could talk about. The question of flyover and connector lanes in West Sacramento is a key component that we need to consider. There's also the addition of auxiliary lanes in Davis and West Sacramento that is currently included in the project description. Transit improvements, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and any other. So I would just invite the board's reflections on these or any other kind of questions or comments that you have, but just to kind of ground our conversation and, what are the sort of the key pieces of this project that we're thinking about.
So I'm going to take it just a slightly different, Autumn. I think these are key items for us. This is the first time that we've together as a board heard this array of presentations. And I think I appreciate Tom's sharing with us that he's made that there was a new aha for him, and I appreciate that he did that. So one thing I'd like to ask is, did any of you have an aha in this conversation? And if you wouldn't mind, if we kind of take turns on that again, if you would tell me any ahas that you have and share that with us all. And then if you have a comment on any of these topics that Autumn has presented as some of the key issues that we're going to be grappling with, please comment on that. And Director Frericks, would you be willing to start off with any new revelations or additional insights, or even a confirmation of something that you were thinking before? Do you have an aha moment? And then do you want to comment on any of these topics?
I would just, thanks, Mr. Chair. I would just say thank you so much to the various presenters this evening. There are so much within each presentation for us to really think about and to sort of continue to sort of, as we get into this topic, this is, I think, an iterative process. And so it's something that, it's not just the sort of application that, went in for infra and we sort of just, run with it and that's it. I mean, there's a lot of significant details that need to be considered as we sort of think about the potential of this project and how it might sort of, unfold or develop over the course of the next several years. And there are so many aspects that I think are, still lots of question marks remain. I mean, just how we might go about getting this to a position of where it's deliverable and in sort of what form. And so really, really appreciate the different sort of very specific examples of both on the research side of things, very much, in also sort of on the ground project delivery in other parts of the state and seeing the templates that exist, and especially also on the equity side of things and how that, I'm very excited to see how that plays out in San Mateo. In about a year from now, we'll know some more details there as well too. So thanks to you all. Really, really looking forward to seeing the slides and being able to take a look at some of especially the various studies mentioned and alluded to by UC Davis. Thanks so much.
Very good. Matt Dulcich, do you have an aha? Do you have any comment on any of the topics that Autumn has presented?
I think my main thought right now is timing and how do we cook up a strategy that is something like a core project plus everything else we might achieve, and then have that strategy that can deliver on the complicated process and the funding constraints. That's my thought, is timing.
Very pragmatic. Jesse?
Well, thank you, Chair Saylor. When thinking about bicycle and pedestrian improvements, it seems like the only part of our strategy that keeps people from being on the road. It's the only one that gives them an option that really takes them out of the road. To me, what my impression of flyover connector lanes is that it's very 19th century thinking with all the problems that 19th century thinking created. And some type of lane management strategy, whatever flavor, might rise to the top as something that that is best for us to pursue.
Very good, thank you. Tom Stallard?
Well, I think you've gotten one aha from me. That's probably all I'm good for tonight. Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
No, well, I don't know if I have any one. There's a few things that caught my ear, and I certainly gravitate towards sort of the funding strategy I brought up earlier, but I was really interested to hear from the San Mateo project and certainly how they are putting equity actually as a planning implementation tool. It's actually something that is tangibly there. Sometimes we talk about it as electeds, as policymakers, as some concept that's, you're not quite sure how you go about making that part of a project. And I think that was something that was really sort of interesting to me, and really interested in seeing how that turns out. But I'm a little like Matt as well. We got a lot to pull together. This agency, this board has quite a bit of firepower. Like I said this before, I really like this board and where we are, and the amount of knowledge that we have built in from every one of us around not only just our county and our own municipalities, but we've all been involved in transportation issues in our own way in our communities. And but this is this is as was brought up from our friends at SACOG, this is a hugely important project to the region. And I'm just going back to the challenge we have to really pull together, get educated as we are. Thank you for pulling this meeting together. But we're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time and learn as we go, learn from these experiences and get to work. We really have a project to get in the ground, which gives confidence to the next round of funders and sources we can do another. So I'm really interested in seeing how we move along and learn as best we can. I'd ask our partners that came in from Southern California, the Bay Area, and elsewhere, we'd appreciate your feedback. And if there's a time, ever a time you might offer us advice about what you've learned from your communities, certainly offer it up. This is a hugely important project, as pointed out. We appreciate the time and effort to kind of give us this education. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Greg Wong, do you have any ahas and any takeaways that you want to share?
Thank you, Director Saylor. So yeah, my aha moment, I think, was the equity presentation. I was just at a few meetings today and I heard, how do we deal with equity? Well, I know San Mateo is a little bit different than, Yolo County, and they got MTC, and as Autumn was talking about, the layers might be a little different, but again, this is another piece of the puzzle that we can use and have conversations as partners going forward. But Krista, I appreciated the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. My comments are that transportation, as we all know, is more than just infrastructure. It's more than lane miles or bridges in a certain place. You got to have those things, but it's really how you manage it. And one of my takeaways from tonight is that we have the opportunity to thread the needle in a very interesting way, and it won't happen if all we're doing is restriping and adding lanes. It's got to be we do have a solution set ahead of us. I think it involves several of the pieces we talked about. I think it's got to involve advancing the cause of transit in the infrastructure. So the interaction between the design of the infrastructure, the technology that supports the use of lanes, and the driving people toward making a choice to use transit on this, I think is really going to be one of the exciting opportunities. I was really interested in I think we all were, in the practical application of equity in the issues that we saw. I think the idea of using the pricing revenue for investments, both in LA for things like advancing bicycle movement or complete streets in the feeder areas, or just community investments, as well as some of the maintenance of the roadway. I think that's very exciting. And I think it can feed into what we're doing. I agree with Tom that this is an opportunity for us to set the bar for our region. And it was interesting to see that in both the Bay Area and in Los Angeles County, they started with one or two projects that then they're now at a point of considering replicating or building on what they've learned in that first round. We are the first out the door. I think we're very well positioned to address it. And my final observation is that Kristen with SACOG, I think, really had a couple of very telling slides for us that the funding is there. And this is unlike any other time where we've been trying to deal with these kind of issues. We now have real opportunities, and I think we can take advantage of them. I think we can thread this needle, and we can do something that will be a legacy for all of us, not just for this board, but for our region. And it will be something that I think we can be very proud that we've been part of. So this, I think, Autumn, you have one more slide to show us.
I do. Yep, go ahead.
So this is what we adopted last month. And the question for us, and I think we have just a couple of minutes now, but my general sense, friends, is that the presentations we've heard and the reflections that we've provided so far, it seems in line with what these goals are. Seems like we did a reasonable job of capturing. I really think that what we heard tonight should tell us that these things are actually possibilities. It's aspirational, but it's also possible. Any thoughts on the goals that we set? And after you've heard from these presenters tonight, is this we will be talking further with Caltrans and with others, and we do have an ad hoc committee of Ledesma, Saylor, and Dulcich, and unless we hear otherwise, we would continue to work on advancing these goals. I see Jessie has her hand up.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to echo what Chris Ledesma said, that this is an amazing board, and the way that we work together and the way that we have created and worked with Autumn on these goals is a reflection. You know, when we hear this presentation tonight and we go, oh yeah, we already have these goals that are the right goals. I think it shows that we're going to be able to do great things with the money and with our planning, because we're on the right track. Thank you.
Good, Jessie. Thank you. Lucas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick addition to that as well too, which I really appreciate that sort of detailed discussion we had at our previous board meeting around this issue and how, you know, sort of that tweaking and fine tuning. I mean, I think these the 8 sort of goals that are listed here, I think, frankly, I think the first round was good. I think this is definitely, I would say, a more well-rounded sort of suite of goals for this particular project. And I think that they've really been improved upon. So really appreciate the sort of thoughtful conversation we had, but then also being able to have it go back to staff and come back for a sort of, you know, in sort of this latest iteration. It's most appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Autumn, I think we have our work cut out for us.
Indeed, we do. Yeah, I just want to again thank everyone for the conversation and really appreciate our speakers who have been hanging with us. Several of whom are actually on the East Coast right now at the TRB conference. So thanks for staying up late. And I want to let you all get back to your evenings. And we do have all the slide. I do have all the slide decks, and I'll make sure everybody gets those. And we're also recording this meeting, and we're going to make a recording of just the presentations available, as well as, of course, the full board meeting for anybody who would like to watch it, who wasn't able to watch tonight. So thanks again to our speakers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I think we stay on the line here for the next meeting, don't we?
We do.
We don't have to click off and go to another Zoom room. We
That's
stay
correct.
here.
We do.
Amy Lee, it's good to see you again in a new capacity.
Lovely to see you, Director Saylor, and a few other directors as well.
Very good. Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
Those
Bye-bye.
of you who are leaving, bye-bye, and we'll go to our next topic. And that brings us to item 5 on our overall agenda. And this is an opportunity for anyone who's with us tonight as members of the public to address matters not on the agenda. We're entering our regular business items, and this is a time for folks to address us on items not on our agenda within the purview of YCTD, we hope. And we have a 3-minute time frame. Is there anyone who'd like to address us?
Mr. Chair, I do see a couple of hands.
Okay. And let's see, we have Jeffrey Targhia. We would like to hear from you. You have 3 minutes to share your thoughts.
Board, I remember with Terry and before, and some of the things in the past, you seem to be progressing well along the line. I'm just wondering how much you're hooked into the Link 21 aspects of coming from the Bay Area that wants to involve this region as well. And remember when you were contemplating what are the capital projects that needed to happen in Yolo County. This seems like one that has profound impact. So I'm hoping I'm added to your distribution list, and I'm hoping that I get the slides, because I have a couple other groups called SACTRU and others that I think this would be something that would be nice for them to see what another county is doing with transportation. And that's my public comment for you. And I say thank you very much. And you're always a good listener. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for being with us. And just briefly, yes, we are connecting with the Link 21 efforts, and we've had it on our agenda a couple of times. We'll do it again pretty soon. So thank you for that. And then we have Alan Hirsch. Alan, we look forward to hearing from you. You have 3 minutes to share your thoughts.
Thank you. Don, I want to appreciate your using my name, because some boards do not use public callers' names. I think that's a sign of respect, and I appreciate that. These are tough decisions you're making, and this is important. I want to suggest that this is an important thing, and you should be able to take all the input possible. There is no common YCTD board email. So no one can send an email to the entire board. They have to be filtered through staff, which slows things down, which happens people send things on a weekend, they get slowed down. You don't get them in time. I would suggest that you urgently set up a YCTD board email address that explodes right to directly, so you can get input from the public. That's an important part of this thing. Thank you so much for this workshop. I'm disappointed you didn't struggle with the issues of induced demand more in your discussion. That's the heart of the thing here. Any capacity increase, again, that's the heart of this thing. I know you're looking for solutions, but doing the right thing is just as important as doing the thing right. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. We'll look into the email suggestion that you make. So that's good. So let's go to item 6 now. This Autumn is that's the micro transit goals for our district, an update on future service in Woodland.
Mr. Chair.
Is there any other public comment? Lucas, go ahead.
Yeah, just a really quick point, because I think it's not explicitly sort of, I would say, in response to public comment, but it just sort of a comment as we finish up with that workshop. I think it's, again, I said this earlier, it's an iterative process, right? So we were asked loud and clear by the public previously that we're not doing enough around some of these issues. So we direct staff, and staff did a fantastic job of coming up with this workshop this evening. And lots and lots of information, and I mean, tons of information, and also I think really great presentations and a lot to think about. And we are, yes, we're a little bit pressed for time because we also have a full, an actual meeting this evening. But I think the key in all of this is it's not a one bite at the apple situation. I mean, this is a process by which, no decisions were made at the last meeting, no decisions were made this evening, no decisions are going to be made the next meeting explicitly on this. So there are opportunities, numerous opportunities for us to sort of continue to have these discussions and to sort of continue to sort of fine tune and refine and such. We know that there's as an example, a funding shortage or funding gap in, between what has been awarded to us by the Federal Department of Transportation and what the ultimate project is going to cost. So we have to figure that out. I mean, there's many aspects that obviously are things that we're having to continue to work on. And so I just think that it's important to sort of keep that in mind, that while we may not have explicitly spent a lot of time talking about induced demand as part of the workshop, I haven't even had a chance to look at all these presentations. I don't think any of the rest of you have either. Or at least in depth, and read the studies and such. So it's something that I feel like there's going to continue to be these kinds of evolving dialogue and discussions around sort of this project. And so, you know, I think that it's just important to note that, you know, that as part of this process. Thanks. Sorry for the maybe belaboring the point, but appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think if all that was being done was adding a lane, then I think all that is probably would be of concern. And I think the studies that we've seen so far suggest that doing that is without other elements, without other management strategies, is probably not what we want to do. But that's not what we're doing. We are doing something quite more intertwined. And I thought the presentations tonight were quite helpful to see the varying ways that we can proceed with this. And I think it was a positive thing. And now, I think we're done with that part of our agenda, and we'll move to item 6, which is microtransit goals and an update on future service in Woodland is how it's pictured.
Yes. Would you like me to just jump into this, Autumn, or did you want to introduce it first?
Yeah, go for it, Kristen.
Okay, great. Can everyone see the slide that's up on the screen?
We can see it.
Okay, great. So I know it's been a long meeting. I'll try to keep this brief, but we did want to give you an opportunity to provide some feedback on microtransit at this junction in that project. As you know, consistent with the Yolo study recommendations that you adopted last year, we are going to be expanding our microtransit offerings in 2022, including replacing some of the fixed route services in the city of Woodland with intra-city microtransit service. Over the past few months, as we've been updating you regularly, we've been working with the City of Woodland staff to prepare for this microtransit expansion by talking to peer agencies to learn best practices, talking to vendors through an RFI process to gather information on the latest technologies available. And all of this background research has prepared us to conduct a procurement for a new technology platform that will enable us to expand and enhance our microtransit offerings. But before we move ahead with that procurement, we wanted to establish some district-wide goals for microtransit, and we'd like the board to have the opportunity to provide some input on those goals tonight. So the purpose of, let's see if I can advance the slides here. The purpose of establishing district-wide goals is to sort of clarify, what do we as a district hope to achieve when we put out microtransit services in different zones? I think we know what we were hoping to achieve when we did it in Knights Landing and Winters, and maybe we have an idea, Woodland might have an idea for what they want to achieve in the city of Woodland, but as a district, when we launch service in any zone, what are our goals? And how will all of these microtransit services that we're putting out onto the street fit into the broader mobility ecosystem in Yolo County? So I'll present you with the draft goals that we've come up with, but just keep in mind that what we've tried to do with these goals is make them broad enough so that each individual jurisdiction can sort of tailor the microtransit service within their jurisdiction or their zones to meet their specific local needs, but also establishing some uniform guidelines and standards that apply to the entire district. So there is a table in your packet showing a list of 7 goals that we've established, and then some further detail on the concrete things that we would want to do in order to achieve that goal. In order to make it more easy to follow and see, I broke the table into several different slides. I'm not going to go into detail about all the subcomponents, but I'll just briefly go over the main 7 goals. So I think that whenever we launch microtransit, we want to be trying to fill some sort of gap in service. We don't want to put microtransit service out on the street just for the sake of doing it. We want it to be filling a need that's not already being met with current options, and we want it to complement and not compete with other transportation options. The second goal that we've drafted is that we'd like to make it easy for the public to discover or stumble upon microtransit services. I think what we've learned through our Knights Landing and Winter service is that the people who use it love it, but once you do an initial launch, it can be challenging for people unless you're constantly marketing the service. It's difficult for them to stumble upon it, but we have come up with some ideas about how we could make that easier in the future. The third goal that we are proposing is that we'd like to make it easy for everyone to use. And so within this goal, we're talking about everyone. We want the user interface to be really intuitive and easy to use. We want a variety of fare payment methods to be used, including cash for those who are unbanked. We want people who don't have a smartphone to be able to use the service by making reservations on the phone. All of those things would fall into this category of making it easy for people to use. The fourth goal is that we'd like the service to be reliable. So when we talk about this, we will be looking at whether wait times are reasonable and consistent, whether the travel times are reasonable. We'd like the service to be safe. We think some of the best ways to achieve that goal are just going to be to make sure that we're meeting all of our FTA requirements. So that's not just a mandate, but something we want to do for the safety of our customers, having the drivers trained properly, drug tested, having the vehicles maintained properly. The next goal we're proposing is that we would like the service to be environmentally sustainable. That can be a challenge with demand response services because unlike fixed route, there can be fewer people in each vehicle on each trip, but in order to make it environmentally sustainable, we'd like to maximize shared rides as much as possible, and we'd like to eventually transition to zero or low emission vehicles. And then finally, the last goal, which without this one, none of the other things would be possible because it needs to be financially sustainable. We'd like the service to be cost efficient and effective. So we want to be able to evaluate our microtransit services and look at the cost per hour, the passengers per hour, and we want our microtransit service to be cost efficient and effective compared to peers who are doing microtransit. We also, as I just alluded to, in order to evaluate this, we're really going to need good access to the data. So when we put microtransit service out on the street, we want to make sure we have transparent data access and that we can sort of evaluate the service and not have to rely on just hoping that it's working well. And we want to make sure that when we're looking at cost effectiveness, we're making sure that the fiscal impact to the core operation is that we're considering the fiscal impact on the core operations of the district. So that was just a brief, the highlights. Like I said, we'll be taking your input on these goals and then using the goals to develop the procurement or the RFP for the technology platform and bringing that back to you next month. So I think we wanted to make sure you had an opportunity, even though you've had a long meeting already tonight, to give some feedback at this juncture, and then we can incorporate that into the RFP when we draft it, along with working with the city of Woodland on that.
You're actually asking for us to adopt the goals.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
That'll feed into the RFP and other considerations.
Exactly, precisely.
Okay, very good. So do we want to do questions and then public comment and then discussion? Autumn, do you have anything further before we open to board questions?
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think we're ready to hear from the board and then have public comment.
Okay. So colleagues, if we have any questions, let's do that first, just so that we can hear if there's any public comment and then discussion. Are there any questions from the board before we hear from public? Okay, is there any member of the public who'd like to address us on this topic?
Oh,
what?
Director
somebody?
you have a question, yeah.
I do have a question,
Sorry.
Chair Saylor.
Yeah.
If I could, just a suggestion that would be an additional goal to consider would be something like making the microtransit representative of the community or part of the community culture, making sure it's not branded as something that's just an outside service that's not part of the community that it's serving. And that might be aspirational. There might not be a way, but if there is a clever branding, marketing, or just positioning and creating a hub for the service that becomes iconic and part of the community, then I think that would be an additional way to show that transportation service is not just its own entity, it's really a part of the community. So hard to express that as a goal, but that's the thought that I'm having.
Could fit in the second one, possibly that you could add language that captures your sense of the community culture to the easy for the public to discover or stumble upon. It fits their culture, fits their sense of need and identity.
That'd be great. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we hear from any public commenters? All right, Jesse, please.
I've really been thinking about this a lot, and Matt's comment about including it in the culture makes me want to ask this now more than later. So it seems like the people that already know about microtransit and winners are riding microtransit. We really need signs in the new senior center or the senior building, senior apartments, in the community center, anywhere where people gather. And there's, maybe 1,000 new residents on the north side of town, and there aren't any bus stops there because we started microtransit while those streets are being completed. So there's no stops that say, like, it would be nice if there was a sign on each of the stops that already exist. Hey, you need a ride? We have microtransit for you, and then how to do it. And so that people that, can even stumble upon the information as needed. And then the other adjacent comment that I have is that, and I don't want to make this longer than I'm already making it longer, so I'm going to apologize for that. But City of Winters has applied for some affordable housing on the new side of town, and we didn't get it. And one of the reasons is that we didn't score high enough, and we didn't score high enough because when they checked the box that when they were asked, like, is it near mass transit? Now, Winters is 2.9 square miles, right? It's not that big, but it's still lost points for not being near mass transit. And the city's understanding of microtransit isn't that it's mass transit. So I think that we have to have a component where either we try to understand what federal housing is asking for and see if we're already meeting it, so that we can tell the cities that we're already meeting it, or we need to meet with city staff that's applying for grants and be able to tell them, no, this is mass transit. It's just another form of mass transit and paratransit that's dependable, and all the other things that mass transit brings. So I'm not sure which way or both ways that the information needs to happen, but we're not able to qualify for, we're being impacted by having microtransit in a negative way in our housing element as it stands. So it really, I'm asking for your help. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Maybe Autumn can consider how that might affect the goal. Sorry, and when we get to discussion, maybe there's a way to do that, or I'm not sure if there is. Are there other questions? We do have 2 public commenters. I don't see any other hands. So we do have Jeffrey Targhia and Alan Hirsch would like to both share with us. Jeffrey, your hand is raised. Yeah.
This is Jeffrey, and I used the Woodland transit system to go around, and knowing the fixed routes offer where so many of your people know exactly what you're doing. I'm going to offer that both at the transit hub for Woodland, that you put up a large signage that gives you the clue about microtransit, and that you put some places throughout where are microtransit favorite locations, so that they know what you mean, and again, how you find them, resolve them, address them. It is a wonderful tool. I'm trying to get, because for regional transit here in Sacramento, the microtransit systems, the local little hubs, are having the greatest ridership, really more than, percentage-wise, either light rail or buses. And so once you get involved with it, you'll like it. But as you say, how you use it, and whether you provide maps or anything else to give you an idea, whether you do it on demand or whether you give microtransit some basic points that they're going to be traveling from. Fortunately, I think all the locations you've talked about so far are less than 15 miles, and so that means less than a 15-minute general trip is likely. It's just some things that for Woodland, and you know, whether you also at the Yolo office, you perhaps get a big screen that shows what your microtransit is doing, just so that you have a clue in and encourage promoting advertising. In other words, saying a lot of signage is, I think, what will help you make this service more readily usable, and some signage to give you a clue of how do you get involved with it. I just bring that to your attention. And again, I enjoyed in when I needed to get around and how I could get around, and the fact that your residents in Woodland knew what time the fixed routes were around, even though you didn't have to look on the pole to get some indication of when they're likely going to be coming. It's something that I very much enjoyed in using Yolo's system to go to Woodland and go to various other locations. And I thank you for that. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Mr. Hirsch, you're with us.
Thank you very much. Kristen always is very thoughtful and careful in her stuff, so I appreciate that comment. I agree that we need to be careful. You only have one chance for a rollout. That's what I learned in marketing through the package. You want to do it right. And you want to distinguish between selling and marketing. Selling is a solution in search of a problem. Marketing is finding the problem and addressing that. And what are the problems? Who has a problem with transportation? They're transportation dependent. So who has to deal with these people? Children after school, youth groups and whatnot. If you could basically talk to youth groups, and maybe they can outreach. Maybe they have constituents who want to be collected and distributed back. Maybe in churches on Sunday. Maybe there are senior groups. Maybe there are latent book groups out there that would love to form, but people can't get to their place at night because the people lose their night vision. You have solutions there. You have a solution that solves people's problem. You can use microtransit, can build community because of this thing. It's a wonderful source of opportunity, but let's get this right before we roll it off. So thank you for your careful and thoughtful use of this service. I know so we'll spend the public money to actually get some 10 or 20 times the benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. I think I don't see any other public comment requests. Are there any that anybody sees? Okay.
No, I don't see
Okay.
it.
Well, we're to the point now to consider the goals that have been placed before us, and we can have discussion. We can modify it. We've got a suggestion from Matt, and I see Chris has got his hand up to begin the discussion phase of our conversation here. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes. Can you hear us? Hear the rest of us?
I can, thanks. So a couple things, and having when we rolled out our on-demand service, WSAC on-demand service, I want to echo exactly what Matt had brought up, Director Dulcich brought up, is that having the branding reflect your community is hugely important. And one of the reasons I think VIA came as such become a good service for West Sacramento. And so I would underscore that it has to be a part of the community branding towards whatever municipality or neighborhood or community it's serving is a huge thing. But I also want to guard us about the other thing we learned. That was one of the few things we got fairly prescriptive about how the service need to reflect the community, be branded toward the community. And I think that's one of the things when we did an RFP out is we were pretty broad, and I would urge maybe Kristen to go back and talk to the folks in West Sac about our exact goals. That we were trying to be fairly open about what a service might bring and be more aspirational about the service we want and let them solve the problem. So I think there's certainly the goals are important about what we want, reliability, certainly ease of use, but there are things that we learn as well about the quality of the ride. And it's something we've spoke about in our learnings in that the service and the mode that VIA had chosen for us, which was the van experience, and the quality of the vans was hugely important. It created a customer experience that we were not prepared for, frankly. We were not, I remember being a little nervous about we're buying Mercedes vans, all leather. You know, this was a fairly fearful, and it felt extraneous sort of spending. But in essence, it's one of the best things we did, because folks, wherever they are, felt safe. They felt it was a clean bus, and it was a quality ride. And if for the mode it was in, it was hugely important. It felt it in its own way lifted people up and made the entire excursion more enjoyable. And for it's something I know our former mayor talked about quite a bit, and as he talked about the quality factor of these rides and the quality of life factor it brings. It's hugely important. So don't discount it, and it's probably something that could be articulated in the easy to use for all, is that it should be a quality ride. So something, you know, aspire more than set a minimum expectation of what the goals more articulate. It has to be aspirational. And the other thing too, as you brought up earlier, is around the data availability. We need to be ready to learn. Being overly prescriptive about where it should run, where it should go, where it should service minimum. We weren't. I think in fact, in our first iteration of it, we were trying to think, should it serve certain parts of the city? Should we have quadrants and that, and we just let it run citywide. And what we learned and continue to learn from it is that the areas that need it will get it. And to us, this has been a huge part of my, at least, awakening towards equity in transit and transportation, and that the demand is there, right? And folks, yes, the accessibility, which you bring up in terms of being able to pay for it in which way, call for appointments, is hugely important. And because that serves seniors and that serves those, and that may not be bankable, as you put it, but it also ensures, you know, the demand will come where the demand comes from. So we see quite a bit of rides from youth. We see quite a bit of rides from seniors that making their life independent. So again, I just really caution us around as we get toward this, and prescribing too much into it as we learn as we go. And having that data availability is a hugely important requirement to do that. So just some thoughts I had where you might have fit them in the goals. I'll let you do that, but just some thoughts that I had. And I appreciate the work, Kristen. And I think it's a good start.
Very good.
Helpful feedback.
Lucas?
A couple quick points. One, thank you, yes, Kristen and other staff for just the work on this. I think it's really timely. That's really the key point in this. The governor today in the budget proposal is just released, has tens of millions of dollars in it for rural, for microtransit, and so I think that's going to be not just rural, but microtransit writ large. But across the state. And so there's going to be real opportunities, I think, for us. I think it's very good timing for us to make sure that we have sort of key goals of, how we want to see microtransit sort of unfold in some of the communities in Yolo County. And so that's definitely, I think, helps set us up for potential applications for state dollars to be used for these purposes. So really appreciate. But I don't have any explicit real changes or suggestions with regard to the items that you've proposed. I think they look good. I think it's a very good start. There may be some over time, certainly, but I think it's, I'm glad to see us sort of taking action on this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Tom? We're enjoying not hearing you, Tom, but it would be better if we did.
Sorry. I certainly appreciate all the comments being made. I think the goals as stated are very good. If they can be better, great. We'll tack on something here or there. But I really want to seize on what Chris said. I really believe in dignifying the client. And you find behavior is better when you dignify them. And, you know, it was a gutsy thing to put leather seats in Mercedes and roll them on the streets to pick up just anybody who needed to go somewhere. So I just feel like all of a sudden, instead of being a down market experience as some perceive transit, whether they're right or wrong, I mean, the new buses are obviously very nice, but, you know, quite service grade, I'd say how most of them are built. You get into a comfortable vehicle and it takes you where you need to go. And you don't have to walk blocks to get into it. And you don't get off of it blocks away from where you may eventually want to go. It's just a revolution in the experience. So I'm totally excited. And I think, Chris, what you and your colleagues done is phenomenal. And you were the first in the country to do it, as I recall. So bravo. And let's learn from all the good things you accomplished. Thank you.
It sounds like we're close to supporting a set of goals. I would just say one of the things that I'm always a little mindful of is the first example is just that. It's a first example, and it's the first time we've solved something or approached something. It's an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to build a platform for the next to come. When we get to the point of getting ready to roll out a novel idea or an approach that works in one setting, it's important to have a set of goals or some way of thinking about it, because now we're at a point of establishing policies that will apply to multiple jurisdictions. So I think that having a set of goals like this, as we consider microtransit rollout in other settings, is really important. And I think it's going to be critically important to look at it as it comes forward, to be sure that it's advancing the cause and the interest of all of the Yolo County Transportation District as we consider in any rollout. And I think this set of goals does that in a balanced way. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into it. We've had one suggestion for a modification in concept from Matt, and I think it looks like that's probably can be worded in a way that I don't know that we need to bring it back. I think we could probably absorb that into a motion. Jesse's question about the building the case for microtransit satisfying housing funding application question about availability of transit may be beyond the goals, but it's nonetheless a topic we want to pay attention to and see if we can help others help others understand that this would be a useful transit option for folks. Is that fair enough, Jesse? Okay. Is there Tom, did you want to make a motion?
I was going to offer the motion that we adopt the goals as stated with possible wordsmithing by staff to include the importance of branding and the importance of spreading the word in for a successful rollout of whatever we come up with.
And
put it in there
I'll second that, Mrs. Toller, if you could amend this thing, also include our comments on an emphasis on quality of the ride and user experience.
Absolutely. I think all these comments are worthwhile. So if you can integrate them, fine, but I think it's easier for staff to do it than for us to try to wordsmith. So.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we could, we are going to, as Kristen mentioned, we'll be bringing the actual RFP for your consideration next month. And so as part of that, we could also bring back a revised set of goals if that's the board's wish based on the
I think we could adopt it tonight with the concepts and the language, and then you can share it with us as we move forward. But I think adopting it and getting it in your hands for action is good. We do have a motion from Stallard, a second from Ledesma. And as I understand the motion, it's the goals as stated with the addition of language about branding and community identity and language on quality and the quality of service that Chris and Tom have eloquently described. Jesse, did you have another comment? I saw your hand fleetingly rise. Okay. All right. So with that motion, could we take roll?
City of Woodland. City of Davis.
Aye.
City of Winters,
Aye.
City of West Sacramento,
Aye.
Yolo County.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. That's exciting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and staff.
Very
Kristen.
good. And this brings us now to item 7, which is everything else that Autumn has to tell us.
That's right. So thank you so much for on behalf of all of us for the great conversation on microtransit. I know it's been a long meeting already, and we are getting close to the end. I do have just a few items from the executive director's report. In addition to what's in here, I do have one kind of verbal update that didn't make it into the report. But so the first cool thing, and as Daisy's pulled up, it is our 40th anniversary this year. In fact, January is the date that our service launched 40 years ago. So we'll be looking for opportunities to mark this milestone over the course of the year. We do have our new communications specialist is going to be starting next week, and we're excited to put him to work as this can be part of his job to make sure we're looking for opportunities to mark the anniversary. Also wanted to note that our service changes in West Sacramento did take effect last week, the first week of January, and that includes the new Route 37, which is our new kind of hybrid route of the Route 35 and 39. And then we did permanently discontinue those 2 routes along with the 241, which, as I understand, was discontinued earlier on in the pandemic, but we've now made that permanent. Next slide. On the hiring front, we are continuing to try to rapidly fill some of our vacancies. We have now filled 2 positions. We have another 3 that are open. We're going to be doing a set of final interviews for our executive assistant and clerk of the board position this week, as well as first round of interviews for our senior planner for multimodal projects. And we're continuing to work on, I think we're actually going to recirculate our grants and procurement specialist position to try to get another batch of candidates for that. And then on interim financial management, as you'll remember at the last board meeting, we approved a contract for us to work with regional government services to provide financial advising as we move through this transitional period towards ultimately hiring a new deputy director of finance. And it's been great. The team that we've been working with has been fantastic. They're putting us all through our paces in terms of helping them understand our systems. We have a draft. I now have a draft preliminary assessment of our financial systems, along with some recommendations that I'm reviewing currently and want to bring that to the board next month, along with a mid-year budget update. So I'm really, and we also are kicking off our audit later this month, our annual audit. So we are definitely putting our team to work and very, very happy to have them on board. And then the verbal update that I wanted to share is with regard to, and Matt, of course, knows all about this, that the UC Davis is currently in a remote learning environment that has been extended now through the end of January. And as part of that, they have asked us to make some changes to our service in Davis. So we're continuing to provide the A and L line services in Davis, but we're now routing all of our services through the MU rather than the silo terminal. And we at this current moment, we're not making any changes to the service frequency. So we're continuing to operate that service frequently at the same frequency for the next few weeks. Although, you know, depending on what the university does going forward, if the remote learning continues beyond the end of the month, we may want to look at potentially reallocating some of those driver resources to some of our other service. Matt, did you want to jump in here?
I'll just jump in with 2 things and say thank you, Autumn, to you and Jose for your help, really quick help last week in making those adjustments. That was great. And then to illustrate some of the difficulties that Unitrans is having with the return after New Year's, they had 5 student drivers quit, just realized that they didn't feel safe driving anymore because of COVID. And then another 30 who for some amount of time last week were on quarantine and isolation, so unable to drive. So really tough times on keeping the buses staffed, and really appreciate the partnership with Yolo Bus. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And then I want to turn it over to Daisy to do our ridership report for the month.
Thank you, Autumn. So for this month of December, we did see a slight dip. However, similar to last month, it is sort of a historical trend still. typically in December, people still aren't riding the buses. However, you know, we see an even bigger dip in the month of December just because some of our Unitrans assistant lines that we were running weren't running at the time due to finals or winter break schedule. And so that's why you see kind of a bigger dip than what we normally see in previous years. Although year to date, we're still seeing an increase. So we saw a 62% increase in the year to date ridership. So we're still on pace. Our ridership is still growing, but we have hopes that it will get back up to pre-COVID levels. And then moving on to our Yolo bus paratransit and microtransit ridership. This one is continuously being going steady. We did see a slight increase from last month, but overall it's still consistent. I think we even in our microtransit, we saw pretty much the same ridership for our microtransit from last month to this month as well. So we're on pace, doing good. And that's all I have for you guys today for ridership.
Great, thanks, Daisy. So that concludes my executive director's report. But I'm happy to take questions on anything that's in the report.
Thank you, Autumn. Any questions, anybody? Very good. Well, this has been a productive meeting, I believe. I appreciate it. It's good when we can have an opportunity to discuss something more than where do we put the next bus stop. So this is a very good conversation for us all, and we're adjourning now. In our next regular meeting, let's see what the piece of paper tells me here. It is February 14, and that's when we'll get back together. Thank you all. Good job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening, friends.
Thank you.
Happy New Year, all.
Good night.
Thank you.